Assalamu alaikum. I'm very sorry. This is Tahir Mustafa from Al-Mawrid, US. It was some technical glitch at my end. Now, Dr. Khalid Zahir is online. I will let him take over from here.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am starting the first of the three 20 minutes sessions that we're going to do. Hopefully, despite the fact that we have lost 15 minutes, I hope that you will all be very kindly sparing extra 15 minutes for accommodating what we have lost on time. The first of slots is reserved for reading a passage of the Quran. I have chosen verses 40 onwards of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran, for reading its verses and translating them. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek God's refuge from the evil whispering of the Satan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. Ya Bani Israel, O children of Israel, Uzkuru ni'mati, recall my blessing, allati an'amtu alaykum, which I had bestowed upon you, wa'ufu bi'ahdi, and fulfill my promise, ufi bi'ahdikum, I shall fulfill your promise, wa iyaya farhabun, and do not fear anyone except me. After the first 39 verses of the Quran, of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, by far the longest chapter, Surah of the Quran is now turning towards the first of the two major themes of the Surah, which is extending invitation to the children of Israel, virtually the Jews. Those people who were the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Abraham, and who were appointed by the Almighty as his representatives to deliver his message to the rest of the mankind as a nation, as a family. The Almighty chose after Abraham his family to be his representatives, to deliver his message to the rest of the mankind, as against the individuals who were chosen before him, who were messengers in their individual capacity, who delivered God's message to the nations that they were sent to. But from Ibrahim onwards, alayhi salam, the Almighty chose his entire progeny family with a clear understanding that because they have to discharge the Almighty's obligation of delivering the message, they are chosen. They are the chosen people. In the sense that if they will take the task seriously, they will get the Almighty's help and support in the form of extraordinary abilities that they will get, the circumstances and the opportunities that will come their way will be not what ordinary people get in discharging their obligations or pursuing their projects. However, there was a flip side to it as well. If they would not discharge their obligations properly, then they will be on the receiving side of the Almighty's decisions. And those very people on whom they were supposed to deliver the message are going to be the ones on whose mercy they are going to be, they will be subjugated and insulted by them. So this is exactly what the Almighty is reminding the children of Israel of what God had promised them, and is telling them that, look here, it's about time that you should fulfill your obligations in the true spirit. So he says, O children of Israel, recall my blessing that I had bestowed upon you, and fulfill my promise, that is the commitment that you make to me. Ufi bi'ahdikum. I shall fulfill your promise. That is, in turn, I will do what I have committed to do. If in case you do your part of the deal. وَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ, and you fear me alone. That is, while discharging this obligation, you will have obstacles, you will have impediments. Uh, People would tell you not to do what God expects from you for one petty worldly reason or another. Don't pay heed to what people are saying. Don't uh, don't be inclined towards the worldly temptations that are stopping you from discharging this obligation. Don't listen to people who are criticizing you. Just fear me alone, and it's only then that you will be able to do what you're expected to do. وَآمِنُوا بِمَا أَنزَلْتُ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ, and believe in what I have revealed. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَكُمْ, which is in the form of a confirmation of what you already have with you. That is, now as you stand in the history of the message and its delivery to mankind, now the time has come when I have appointed from within the children of Ishmael, a messenger, well within the announced policy that I made, that I am going to continue to deliver my message to people from the children of Abraham. So it was like 2,000 years of monopoly that you were able to receive, to be able to get from the Almighty, when only children of Israel had the privilege of receiving God's message and his prophets. Now, going by the same policy, there is no change whatsoever. I have revealed my message to a prophet here in the Arabian Peninsula, and it was a part of the deal I made with you. And you believe in him, believe in the message, and this message is confirming what you already have. That is, what you already have in your books are prophecies confirming that there would come another prophet who will be from Mecca and who will be from the children of Ishmael. And you already know him. So believe in him. وَلَا تَكُونُوا أَوَّلَ كَافِرٍ بِهِ, and don't be the very first to reject him. That is, you were the ones who were entrusted with the task of introducing him to others, confirming the correctness of his claim to be God's messenger because of what you have in your books as prophecies confirming his arrival. That would be what would bring you God's mercy, his pleasure, because in that case you will be discharging what exactly is desired by the Almighty from you. But if, on the contrary, you will reject him, it would be a shame. Don't be the very first to reject him. That is, you were the ones who were expected to let others come to believe him. And on the other hand, what you're doing, lo and behold, is that you're rejecting him. Don't do that. وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِي ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا, and do not compromise my verses for petty value, petty considerations. That is, if you would do what I am asking you to do, it's going to bring you success of both worlds. It would bring you the pleasure of the Almighty. But if you're going to not accept what is being presented to you, you will lose simply because of some very ordinary, petty considerations of this world. That is, you will do it because you would not want your worldly status of religious scholars whom people seek to get guidance and to get religious edicts. You think that your position is going to be compromised, and that is why you're not inclined to accept the message. Don't do that. Don't compromise and sell the Almighty's verses for petty considerations, petty value. Vayyaya fattakun, and fear me alone. That is, it is my fear, your realization that you're going to be accountable to me one day, that is going to save you from committing this blunder of ignoring my message for petty worldly considerations. Wala talbisul haqqa bil batil, and do not. I have to just run away for bringing in my what's wrong? My battery is not charging.
I really apologize for the late starting. I was just filling up for Shuke Bhai. So next time, if I will be filling up, I hope I will overcome these technical issues which I had to go through today, and I end up having all of you guys wait. I really sincerely apologize, everyone, and I hope everybody can stay and let him finish uh, for the whole duration. Appreciate it.
Is telling these people, the children of Israel, the Jews, that look here, don't deceive people by mixing what is truth with what is untruth. You see, that's one of the biggest problems many people, which causes many people to be deceived. Uh, the reason is that when people see that that there are some scholars who are saying many things which are good, reasonable, make a lot of sense. Uh, they start believing them. They start feeling confident that what they're saying has to be right. But then they mix truth with untruth. Some of the things that they start mentioning they are untrue. The Almighty is asking the children of Israel to do exactly that. Well, not to do exactly that. That is, do not mix the truth with untruth. That is, obviously, they must have been telling their people about what Torah is saying, which obviously was God's book. And therefore, what Torah was mentioning was true. But then obviously they were not saying the whole truth, which obviously makes things so very difficult for the ordinary person to understand what the truth is. They get confused because ordinary people are not quite as discerning uh, to be able to distinguish between the right opinions from the wrong opinions. Once they are impressed by a religious person because of because of the good things that he's saying, well, they feel that it must be that everything that person is saying has to be correct. So the Almighty is asking the Jews scholars not to mix the truth with the untruth, وَتَكْتُمُ الْحَقَّ, and do not hide the truth. وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, knowingly. That is, this is the untruth that they were conveying. They were not clarifying that the new prophet who has arrived and who is inviting people to believe in him is from God, and his arrival has been clearly prophesied in Torah. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ, and establish prayers. That is, pray regularly and give zakat and incline with those who are inclining in prayers. That is, the Almighty is now giving the remedy, the cure, which if they go for, would enable them to follow the Almighty's path properly. They were not doing what the Almighty was expecting from them because they were not fearing God. They were not God conscious. They did not find occasions when they were reminded of the fact that they're going to be accountable to the Almighty. So he's asking them to pray regularly and to give zakat. Now, by giving zakat, a person who does it regularly and properly, he is able to cleanse the unnecessary, exaggerated love of wealth and worldly matters uh, from his soul. So that's what their problem was: exaggerated love for the worldly life and and their arrogance. So the Almighty is asking the children of Israel as a remedy, as a cure for the ailment, the spiritual, moral ailment that they were suffering from, to establish prayers regularly and to pay zakat, warka'u ma'ar raki'in, and to incline along with those who are inclining. That is, say your prayers with congregational prayers, so that in the company of good people, you are able to improve. أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do you invite people to do what is good and you forget your own selves? That is, you deliver speeches, sermons, wherein you tell people to be God conscious and to follow God's commands no matter what. But when it comes to your own turn, you forget about it. وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابِ, even though you recite the book. That is, what a shame that you are reading the book, you're inviting people to goodness, but the only person that you leave out for not informing is your own self. You don't get influenced. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you use your senses? Are you not thinking properly? وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, seek help from patience and prayers. That is, seek help from patience and steadfastness, which you will get if you are persistent in your prayers. You're persevering in your prayers. Your prayer is going to give you steadfastness, reason for you to be firm in the right path. وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ, and indeed this task is very tough, uphill, except for those who are khashin, who fear, who are humble. الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ, those who are conscious of the fact that they are going to meet their Lord, وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ, and that they're going to return to Him. So these were the verses which are inviting, more particularly, the scholars of Jews to have faith in the Quran and the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, and it is telling them to get rid of the weaknesses that they are suffering from, and the Almighty is also mentioning the ways they can overcome the problems that are becoming a reason and obstacle for them to do what the Almighty is commanding them to do. After this first session, now I am expected to go for the second session, which discusses one of the misunderstandings of Muslims. So there are quite a few misunderstandings that we Muslims have in our reading of Islam, the way it's conveyed to us. I am going to talk about one important misunderstanding. Remember, I mentioned in the last session a misunderstanding wherein Muslims have this common belief that on the day of judgment there are going to be scales of good and bad deeds, and if our good deeds are going to outweigh our bad deeds, we'll be successful. So what happens is that as a consequence of doing good deeds, and as a consequence of exaggerated mention of the fact that good deeds, are going to be rewarded, graded many times more than what they are worth, and the bad deeds are going to be will carry weight only to the extent that they are worth. So this understanding leads to let people to believe that their good deeds are going to be far greater than their bad deeds, and as a result, they will be successful in the next life. Pardon me, I just have a problem here. Right. Now, today what I'm going to talk about is another misunderstanding, and that is the misunderstanding about intercession, what we call shafaat. Shafaat is intercession. There are many Muslims who believe that they are going to be successful in the next life, and they are going to be successful simply because of the fact that God's messenger is going to intercede for them, and no matter how poor their performance, his intercession is going to come to their rescue. That is why what we find is that quite often when Muslims pray, they seek the Almighty's help. They ask Him to enable them to get the privilege of being interceded for by the Prophet, may God mercy be on him. And the end result is that, instead of concentrating and focusing on the real performance that they're doing in this life, they are banking upon and relying on the intercession. Now, when you read the Quran, you find that the Quran is not giving any reason for the reader to hope that on the day of judgment, it is going to be the intercession of the Prophet that is going to come to her rescue. On the contrary, what you find is that the Almighty is very clearly mentioning that there is going to be no intercession on the day of judgment whatsoever. So, on the one hand is this understanding of intercession, which is one of the most favorite topics of our prayers, subjects that we resort to while asking the Almighty's help. On the other hand, what we have in the Quran is a clear mention that no intercession whatsoever is going to enable anyone to be helped. Now, where have things gone wrong? You see, if you read verse 48 of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, we've already read the verses immediately before this verse. This particular verse is mentioning the fact that, O children of Israel, Ya Bani Israel, Uzkuru Ni'mati, you recall my blessing, Anamtu alaykum, that I bestowed upon you. Wanni faddaltukum alal alameen, and the fact that I gave you superiority over the entire mankind. That is, this particular verse is again inviting the children of Israel to recall the fact that the Almighty has been very kind to them in ensuring that the children of Israel are going to benefit from the Almighty's blessings. But the next verse goes on to state, "Wattaqu yawman," fear the day, la tajzi nafsun an nafsin shay'a, when no soul is going to benefit from the help of anybody else. Nobody is going to come to the rescue of anyone else. Wala yuqbalu minha shafa'atun, and no intercession is going to be accepted on his behalf. Wala yu'khadhu minha adlun, nor any payment is going to be received on behalf of anyone. Wala hum yunsarun, and nor are they going to be helped from the outside. So the Almighty is, in other words, is completely negating the possibility of intercession. But as I said, there are Muslims who are banking all their hopes on intercession. And one of their favorite prayers is to get the Prophet's intercession. Now, why has this confusion come about? The fact of the matter is that in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 48, that I've already mentioned, there is a clear statement that no intercession is going to help anyone. 123 verse of the same chapter, Surah, says the same thing. And then verse 254 again re-emphasizes the same reality, that La yuqbalu minha shafa'atun. In verse 254, which is addressing believers, it says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu anfiqu mimma razaqnakum. Believers, spend from what we have given you in the form of sustenance. Min qabli an ya'tiya yawmun, before there comes a day, la bay'un fihi wala khullatun wala shafa', when there is going to be no trade. You will not be able to trade off your sins for anything else. No friendship is going to help you out, nor any intercession. So, complete and categorical negation of all forms of intercession are mentioned in the surah. In these, now, obviously, it's a puzzle. On the one hand, this is what the Quran is saying, but on the other, what we see is that prayer for intercession is very popular. Now, the reason is that the very next verse, that is Ayatul Kursi, probably the most famous verse, the verse of the throne. It says, Man zallazi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'izni. Who is there who can intercede before him except by his leave? That is, the Quran is now giving some kind of a possibility that there could be some intercession that might help uh, in people getting successful in the life hereafter. Now, obviously, the Quran is God's word. It has no contradictions. One of the reasons why the Quran says a reader should feel confident that it's God's book is the fact that it is free from all contradictions. Why then should one not believe that a mention in verse 254, where there is a complete negation of the possibility of intercession, as indeed it is there in the earlier two verses in the same chapter, why should these statements not be considered contradicting the very next verse, where it states that some kind of intercession indeed is going to be possible? Well, let's move on. And one of the things that I would like to assure you is that the Quran, if read properly and deeply, with deep reflection, to begin with, you might find that you are getting a bit confused. You might find that there are apparent contradictions here and there. But thereafter, when you take the reading of the Quran seriously, you come to the realization that what you thought was a contradiction was not a contradiction after all. It was some point that you had missed. It was some aspect of the presentation that you were not conscious of. So what we find, if we move on to some of the other verses relevant to the subject of the Quran, what we find is that in the 78th chapter in Surah An-Naba, verse 38, the Almighty is talking about the life hereafter and mentioning the fact that in the life hereafter, La yatakallamun, people are not going to speak before him. Illa man azina lahu rahman, except for the one whom the gracious God is going to permit. Waqala sawaba, and he is going to say what is true, what is correct. So, in other words, the Quran is mentioning the fact that even though there's going to be no intercession in the real sense, some intercession is going to be possible, and that is going to be allowed by the Almighty to some people who, when they're going to speak, they will speak what's true. And one more mention is relevant in the Quran, which is 23rd verse of the 34th chapter, that is Surah Saba, verse 23, wherein the Almighty is saying that no intercession is going to help anyone except the person for whom intercession is going to be allowed. So these are the different mentions in the Quran that have got to be attempted to be reconciled. A, no intercession at all. B, some intercession by the leave and permission of the Almighty. C, nobody shall be allowed to speak on the judgment day except whom the compassionate God is going to allow. And D, nobody is going to benefit from intercession except the one for whom permission is going to be granted for getting benefit through intercession. Now, what does this all mean? I'm just going to attempt to give an explanation. You may or may not agree with it, but the answer to this puzzle that comes to one's mind is that the Almighty is telling us that, look here, on the day of judgment, everybody is going to be treated on the principle of justice, equity. Uh, there's going to be no partial treatment of some to the exclusion of others. Everyone is going to get the same fair treatment by the Almighty. And therefore, there's no chance, there's no possibility of anyone getting outside help in the form of intercession. That's what the principle is. That's how it's going to be on the Judgment Day. However, God is not just fair, God is compassionate as well. God, the compassionate God, Ar-Rahman, will decide that although on the Day of Judgment, the minimum expectation from an individual's performance was of a certain level, he will bring down that level, the threshold, to a lower level. Like in the good old days of ours, when we used to study, the pass percentage used to be 40 in a subject. But if somebody was able to, a student was able to bag 33% marks, he was eligible for grace marks. The teacher could exercise his privilege by declaring him as successful. It seems that quite the same way, the Almighty is going to allow, after the decision for those who would finally succeed, he is also going to allow the bar of minimum passing marks to come down. So from 40%, just giving examples, it's going to come down to 33%. Now, for these people who would now be eligible to succeed, their success is not going to be announced, it's not going to be in the same manner, it's not the same category of success. It is going to be accompanied by intercession, to be done by the people whom God would pick and would ask them to intercede, and they would say nothing except what God would say to them to state. And these people are going to be the ones who would be identified by God Himself, because they are going to be the ones who will have a certain minimum level which will already have been lowered to meet the minimum expectation. Why would those people who would be asked to intercede be asked to do the job? Because the Almighty would like to give them the honor and the privilege of being those special people who would be instrumental, who would be used by the Almighty in His process of forgiving some people. That really means that in order for one to be eligible to get intercession, one has to work, one has to struggle and reach a minimum mark. This intercession will not negate what has been mentioned in the 3 verses of Al-Baqarah, that there is going to be no intercession. The negation in those verses is the negation of intercession, which will cause a person who has failed to pass, a person, in our example, who has bagged only 15% marks, to be able to succeed. That possibility is not there at all. If there is any possibility, it's based on the performance of the individual, but the performance not being up to the mark to be able to get the minimum marks to succeed on his own, it's going to be based on a process which is going to involve intercession. Now, that being the case, there is no reason why we should pray for intercession. We should pray for success without intercession, because intercession, its process is going to entail difficulties, a long waiting period. God knows, maybe some dip in the hell before being lifted through intercession. That is exactly what you learn from the ahadith, the narratives that are talking about intercession. But I don't have now time to talk about them. I have now done with my second part of the presentation as well. I'm extremely sorry, I think primarily my inability to understand the technicalities and intricacies of the system of internet, etc., that caused the presentation to be disturbed. But I hope that you heard some part of my presentation. Now I am available for your questions if there are any.
Khalid bhai, don't feel bad. I think it was me, not you.
Well, I think it was mutual. We were both involved. So, question.
It's our time for question hour answer. If anybody has a question, I don't see anybody raising any hand.
That's always a good sign.
You can even post a question, Khalid bhai. I have two questions on. I have one question from Kashif Khan. So last week presentation was not complete because there was some glitch on our service provider, and we are checking if they can retrieve the missed part of the presentation. If we were able to get it, we will send an email with the complete presentation. It was they're still trying to recover the lost part of the presentation from the last week, Kashibai. And then, Khalid bhai, there was a question from Sajid Yaqub Saab that if he can send you an email directly, are you
Oh yes,
okay to?
he's most welcome. But I don't know whether you like the idea or not. I would welcome the idea, but I am a WhatsApp man. If you would send me a WhatsApp message, I probably would be more comfortable. Somehow, my email address is invaded by many emails which are unwanted. So if you could make note of my uh, mobile number, WhatsApp number, I would prefer. But obviously, if you feel more comfortable sending me an email, that too is okay. Should I write
So
it?
for your email is kzmorid@gmail.com,
That's right.
and then I can share your mobile number, which is 335-494-4936.
That's right. But obviously preceded by the customary other +92.
Yes,
Okay.
correct, correct. Yes. Oh, I was trying to unmute if anybody has a question, but then was some noise, so I unmuted everyone. So if somebody raises a question, I will unmute their mic. But I don't see anybody raising any question. So since we are already at on the dot of our time, though we lost some time in the beginning, but I think we are compensating by people not asking questions. So, should we conclude today's presentation? Oh, sorry,
Right.
Taj Khan has a question.
Okay.
So let me unmute. Tashkan, you have to unmute your own mic. It's self-muted.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
My question is that you talked about intercession, and with respect to the prophets, I think they can intercede on your behalf if Allah permits them. But there are common belief that these other awliya Allahs, these very learned people and those people who have provided a great service.
You see, once the principle is clear, we can understand all the other details and other possibilities as well. There is nothing that would stop us from accepting that people other than prophets can also intercede for others, provided the principle that this intercession is not going to enable an individual who otherwise didn't deserve because of him or her not getting the bare minimum marks and yet is going to succeed. So if you are able to achieve that minimum threshold that is going to be brought lower because of the Almighty's mercy, it could be the prophets, it could be some other pious people, etc. But the important thing is, the important message is that don't bank your hopes on intercession. You see, what happens is, psychologically, that if you somehow are confident that some individual, somebody other than God, will be instrumental in enabling you to succeed, despite your otherwise poor performance, undeserving for you to succeed, instead of focusing your attention on doing well as a human, as a Muslim, the individual is going to focus her attention on pleasing that non-God, person, being, whether a human or an angel or whatever. The Quran is very emphatic in stating that those who bank upon their hopes on false intercession don't believe in the life hereafter. Because if your hope is on intercession, then the life hereafter and its fear, the apprehension of standing before God for accountability will not deter you from doing wrong. Why? Because you think that you've got strong connections, and those connections are going to come to your rescue despite your poor performance. So the Quran says, those who name angels after females, لا يؤمنون بالآخرة. They don't believe in the hereafter. The people of Mecca, they had feminine names for angels because their understanding was that these angels are the daughters of God, and God would not refuse, would not reject what they would ask them to do, because they are God's favorites. So that kind of an intercession is what has been completely rejected by the Almighty in His statement in Surah Al-Baqarah. But there is going to be some intercession which is going to be based on the principles of both justice and mercy. So anybody can do it, provided if the basic principle is not compromised. I hope it answers.
I have shared your WhatsApp number with the whole group, today's group,
That's
and
great.
I'm still sending your email just in case if somebody will still prefer to send you the email instead. And I'm gonna go ahead and share with everyone. I hope Kashif Khansab, your question was addressed, and अगर आप directly quick question or if you want to ask any question directly. You have to unmute your mic. Your mic is self-muted. But I've tried to. So I think he will send you directly. He has some
Okay.
question about. There's an article on the Mother Jones called "The Stealth Crusader," and
Okay.
he wants your comments. But I think he was asking your WhatsApp number. So it
Right.
was. Uh,
Inshallah. Fine.
I hope I'm not missing anybody's. Sure. Yeah, he's just said thanks. So I think we should just conclude today's session with your permission, Khalid.
Thank you very much. Most certainly.
Thank you, everyone. Shall I see you next Saturday? Assalamu alaikum.
Right. Okay. My number is, let me write it. My number is +92. There you are. Now, my mercy shall always prevail over my wrath is a Jewish saying, exactly what the first hadith could see. If this is so, there should be no need for intercession. Well, intercession and God's mercy are not at odds with each other. Intercession is going to be one way of exercising God's mercy, one method through which He is going to show His mercy. That's why it says in Surah An-Naba 78, Illa man azina lahu rahman, except those whom the compassionate God Rahman is going to permit. So God's mercy and intercession are not at odds with each other. So, and the Quran also says, وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, and my mercy, it overwhelms everything else. That is, I have all the good attributes that I possess, but my mercy is the most predominant. So it's His mercy that is going to be expressed in the form of intercession as well. The intercession is not going to be, something exercised uh, other than God's mercy in ways which are going to ignore His mercy. It's God's mercy that is going to find its expression in the form of intercession. I hope it's clear. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's go. Let us go.